The topic of my presentation is international hydrogen evolution and implications for Germany. And as Dr. Albrecht just mentioned, I work for the World Energy Council Germany, which is a member committee of the World Energy Council, is the largest energy network in the world. The World Energy Council was founded in 1923, so we're about to celebrate our 100-year anniversary very soon. And the World Energy Council consists of around 90 member committees all over the world, and it was founded to promote the sustainable use of energy. In this World Energy Council, we represent all energy sources and technologies. And every 3 years, we organize the World Energy Congress. And the next one will actually take place next year in St. Petersburg, Russia. And as World Energy Council Germany, we try to bring the global perspective into the national debate. And therefore, during my presentation today, I would like to give an international perspective on the topic of hydrogen, because as Dr. Albrecht has already mentioned, hydrogen has become a priority on the global energy agenda, especially during these past 2 years. And therefore, together with Ludwig Börke Systemtechnik, we published a study on international hydrogen strategies in last September. We will basically analyze which countries have already published government strategies regarding hydrogen, what were the motives behind those strategies, what were similarities and differences between the analyzed strategies, what are the target sectors and infrastructure for hydrogen use, and basically the government measures to support hydrogen use, to derive global trends and conclusions for a global market in the end, because as World Energy Council, we always try to have a look at the global market. And in this case, on the global market for hydrogen. Last September, we came to the conclusion that over 20 countries worldwide had already announced their own hydrogen strategy or had planned to do so in the future. And more than 30 countries were either supporting national hydrogen projects or discussing policy action for hydrogen use. Since then, many more countries around the world published their hydrogen strategies or announced their publication. And to visualize this development, I would like to compare last year's timeline of released hydrogen strategies with this year's. So what you see here was the first timeline that we published when we released our strategy in September 2020. And what you see in the next slide is actually the timeline as of November 2021. So you can see a vast number of strategies that has been published during the past 2 years. And the majority of government strategies have been published actually since April 2020, which you can see here. Only Japan, France, South Korea, and Australia published their strategies before that. And Japan actually can be seen as a pioneer in the field of hydrogen, as it already presented a comprehensive strategy paper at the end of 2017. And then, South Korea followed roughly a year later. Australia published a strategy in November 2019. And then nothing happened for a while until April 2020, basically. And since then, which you can see perfectly on the slide, we've seen a real boom in government strategies concerning the use and production of hydrogen. Basically, every month, 1 or 2 governments presented their own plans for the production and use of hydrogen. And what you can also see on the slide is that there are a lot of more countries that are preparing to present their strategies. For example, we expect to see strategies from Australia, from Morocco or Sweden sometime soon. On the next slide, you can see what we call our global map of government activities or hydrogen activities all around the world, which you can see on this slide very well. That is really a global phenomenon. So it's not just a European or a German hype, but it's really a topic that covers the whole world, so to say. In dark blue, you can see the countries that have already presented their national hydrogen strategies, and the different colors indicate the level of hydrogen activity. So the lighter it gets, the less binding the strategies or the hydrogen activities. So for example, some countries are just starting to work on demonstration or pilot projects, and others are perhaps only having initial discussions about hydrogen use. But I think what you can clearly see is that hydrogen has become a topic of global importance. And what we found is that the strategies often differ in their focus, in their degree of concretization and their measures. For example, in some cases, they tend to be just mere visions. In others, they are already very concrete, where they mentioned concrete measures, for example, such as in the German strategy. Overall, however, we found that the modus behind the strategies are often similar. And these include in particular the achievement of climate goals, such as the reduction of national greenhouse gas emissions, as well as a better integration of renewables into the energy system, diversification of the energy supply in general, and then, of course, economic growth, which is very important motive in many strategies. Economic growth, for example, through the creation of new jobs or hydrogen and technology exports. And when analyzing target sectors, which is on the next slide, most countries identify industry and transport as the main sectors where hydrogen should be used. The transport sector is actually a relevant target sector in all plans we analyzed, all hydrogen strategies, but often with a different regional focus, which you can see on the next slide. So for example, in Asia, in Japan, South Korea, and China, fuel cell vehicles play an important role in all sectors of road transport, including passenger cars. The European strategies rather intend to use hydrogen in heavy-duty commercial vehicles and buses, and not primarily in passenger cars. And some hydrogen plans also mentioned green synthetic fuels, so from PTL or PTX processes, as an option. For example, in sectors where the direct use of electricity is difficult or uncompetitive, such as air or maritime transport. And the advantage of these synthetic fuels is that they can be used in existing engines without modifications. Also, they offer a short-term perspective for decarbonization. Besides the transport sector, industry is a central sector for the use of clean hydrogen and its derivatives, especially in countries with a significant industrial production and ambitious emission reduction targets. Hydrogen already plays an important role in the chemical industry, for example, as well as in refineries as a feedstock for a variety of products and processes, for example, like the production of ammonia. As you can also see on the slide, in some countries in Asia, for example, in Japan and South Korea, also the heat market is considered an important application area for hydrogen in the short term, for example, by using hydrogen in small fuel cells in the building sector. Moving on to the next slide, to the colors of hydrogen, what we call it. Because when it comes to the question of how the hydrogen should be produced, the strategies show different paths. From short to medium term until about 2030, many countries consider various types or colors of hydrogen as a possibility to provide the required quantities of hydrogen. So many countries such as Germany and Australia already use gray hydrogen from fossil fuels today, for example, in the chemistry sector, in the chemical industry. Blue hydrogen, which is produced from fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage, is also seen as part of the solution in many countries, for example, in the Netherlands. And Other types of hydrogen, for example, pink, or sometimes referred to as yellow hydrogen from nuclear energy, can also play a role in some countries, for example, like France. And turquoise hydrogen from methane pyrolysis is mainly discussed as an option in the German and Russian strategies. However, with regard to the increasingly ambitious climate targets of many countries, most of the hydrogen plants that we analyzed emphasized the use of green hydrogen from renewable energies in the long term, which means until around 2050. And renewable hydrogen is seen as an important means to decarbonize the energy system, obviously, and this focus on green or renewable hydrogen is especially pronounced in the EU and its member states, as you can see on this slide. When we're looking to other regions of the world, for example, Asia, the use of blue hydrogen is also still considered a viable option, even in the longer term. And for some countries, like for example, Russia or South Korea, even gray hydrogen will continue to play a role indefinitely. When we have a look at the demand, the expected hydrogen consumption, not all strategies mention their expected consumption in the future, but scaling up a demand expected for 2050 in the strategies that do to a global level, we reached the conclusion that up to 9,000 terawatt hours or 270 million tons per year could be consumed in the year 2050. And to give you a sort of an idea of how much that is roughly half of the total primary energy consumed by the EU 28 in 2019. However, one of the problems, so to say, is that the production and consumption of hydrogen do not always coincide. Therefore, many countries will not be able to cover their future hydrogen demand, especially of green hydrogen, with their own production capacities, for example, due to a limited potential of renewable energies. And one good example is actually the European Union, because when you look at the EU, the European Commission announced its own hydrogen strategy in July 2020, mainly to reduce emissions and to diversify the energy supply and to foster economic growth, for example, by creating new jobs. And according to a new study by the World Energy Council Europe, in 2050, the total demand of hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels in the EU could increase from the current level of 10 million tons per year to as much as 60 million tons or 2,000 terawatt hours by 2050. And according to the study, the domestic decarbonized hydrogen production will be able to meet less than 50% of the projected hydrogen demand in 2050. This means that the EU will have to import around 30 million tons of decarbonized hydrogen and derivatives per year by 2050. And decarbonized hydrogen includes, in this case, renewable hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and pink hydrogen from nuclear. And so one of the conclusions is that one of the drivers for hydrogen imports is actually, the volume of hydrogen needed, especially the amount of electricity needed to produce green hydrogen. Well, electricity is central to all decarbonization strategies in the EU, and decarbonizing the electricity production alone will require a fourfold increase of solar PV and wind capacity by 2050 with respect to today, which is what you can see in this slide. And producing domestically all the 60 million tons of projected hydrogen demand by 2050 would require an 8-fold increase of wind and solar compared to today, which is a lot, obviously. And the country-by-country analysis showed that this is going to be an unattainable goal for several EU countries. And therefore, establishing strategic relationships with potential exporters will be central to increasing the share of hydrogen in the European energy mix. Bringing this decarbonized hydrogen into the EU will require substantial investments in production and transport infrastructure. And in our latest study, which I just mentioned from World Energy Council Europe, we found that that the total investment required by partner countries for hydrogen export to the EU by 2050 will be around 760 billion euros, or roughly $900 billion. For example, for the construction of hydrogen production facilities, the construction of wind and PV plants, pipelines, port terminals, and so on, which is quite a large amount. And this large amount will probably require partnerships between importing and exporting countries to share the investment costs and the risk in the end. As you can see on the next slide, during these past few months, all over the world, international hydrogen partnerships have been developed. And these partnerships range from initial talks about possible cooperations to memorandums of understanding to concrete projects like the High Supply project between Australia and Germany. And yeah, as you can see, the number of strategies, which are in the beginning, especially bilateral or trilaterally, has really grown significantly, especially in 2021. And to show you a little bit more who are the countries that, between the partnerships have been developed, we just launched a new Sankey diagram in September, where you can actually see that the majority of intergovernmental partnerships are being formed by a few countries. Namely, on the one hand, those that expect to import hydrogen, for example, Germany and Japan. And on the other hand, countries that intend to export their hydrogen, such as Australia or Chile. And we can also see in this graph, this is very well, that Germany is currently the country with most international hydrogen partnerships, followed by Japan and then South Korea. We expect the number of partnerships to increase in the future still, because these partnerships offer the opportunity to jointly develop hydrogen technologies, to build hydrogen value chains, and to establish trade relations. And as World Energy Council, we will continue to monitor the development of these partnerships closely. And you can find an updated version of these graphs on our website, which I had also included in the presentation. Last month, we presented the results of our new survey on the topic German Energy Policy, a Blueprint for the World. And every 2 years since 2011, as World Energy Council Germany, we have conducted a survey of our global peers, asking for their perception of Germany's energy policy and its impact domestically and abroad. And as part of the survey this year, we asked respondents whether they see potential for cooperation between their country and Germany in promoting the use of green energy. And as you can see on the slide, 93% answered yes. So there's an unanimous belief that Germany can cooperate with other countries in promoting the use of green hydrogen, which we found very interesting. And maybe having a look at the German national hydrogen strategy in the end. Germany released its national hydrogen strategy in June of 2020, so of last year. And the main goals of the strategy are the support of the energy transition, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the integration of renewable energies into the energy system, and to develop world-leading technologies for export. Germany expects to use between 110 and 380 terawatt hours of hydrogen by 2050. And since Germany also aims to use especially green hydrogen in the long term, and the potential for producing renewable energies in Germany is limited, Germany is set to become the EU's largest hydrogen importer. Therefore, establishing international partnerships is an essential element of Germany's hydrogen strategy, for which it has earmarked a total of 2 billion euros. Germany even launched a special instrument called H2 Global, which started work this year. And that's a program that intends to match the hydrogen demand in Germany with supply from countries all over the world via a foundation called HINCO. And the foundation will purchase green hydrogen or derivatives abroad via long-term contracts in order to resell the hydrogen in Germany at annual auctions. And maybe to come to a conclusion, hydrogen has become a global issue, and by 2025, sorry, hydrogen strategies are expected in countries covering over 80% of global GDP. Initial application sectors focus on the transport and industry sectors. Green hydrogen is central to all strategies. Blue and other colors of hydrogen will mainly play a role in the transition period before 2050. And in several countries with high energy needs, a substantial share of hydrogen demand will be served by imports, initially on the basis of bilateral agreements. Hydrogen partnerships are already developing all over the world. And in the end, to ensure that the necessary investments into the production and transport infrastructures are being made in a timely manner, a clear legal and political framework is needed, and that includes establishment of international quality, technical and safety standards for hydrogen and its derivatives, the establishment of a certification system for renewable and low carbon hydrogen, and also a solid legal framework that enables and coordinates the development of the hydrogen structure in the EU. Yeah, with this, I would like to conclude, and thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.